An open centre diff, one tyre fire, YOLO, you only left one. The Broadmeadows wedding sign off, single wipe skiddy, single pegger, single legger, single spinner. LS don't bother, the line of shame, the fun killer, etc. Whatever you call it, if you're only spinning one tyre instead of two, not only are you slower and having less fun, it's also kind of super lame. Today, we'll try and deal with this issue in our Falcon, as well as, while we're in there, fixing those dreaded diff bushes. Hope you enjoy. Hey there, welcome back to Browney's Garage and the next episode in our basic performance mod series. In this series, we're hoping to take my fairly slow stock BA XR6 Falcon to something a little bit quicker, a little bit more fun, and covering off most of the basic mods that we all do when we're starting out in cars or starting with a new project. So far we've increased power by installing a cold air intake, a full exhaust system, and a set of underdrive pulleys. But any power gain we've got there will be completely wasted if we can't put it to the ground, and even at stock power I'm still wondering if we were spinning the tyres a little bit when we were launching this. That may also have been due to the cheapo no-name tyres we have on the back and the 40+ degree day we had at the drag strip that day. But beyond all that, it would be nice when we do go back to the drag strip to be able to spin both tyres in the burnout box instead of hoping no one saw us only spinning the one. And here's the plan to sort all of that. Here we have the complete diff assembly from a BA or BF Turbo Falcon. These can run you from anywhere around $300 up is fairly normal, and they give us a few nice added bonuses as well. It of course has the LSD centre that we're after, but as well as that, that centre and the axles are beefed up in these models and can handle more power and abuse. Probably not something that's an issue for us at this stage, but it does help to support more future mods. The gears in this diff will be the same as what's currently in the car at 345 or 346 I believe they are. Now while some shorter diff gears would have been really helpful for our launches while we're in there, I've decided not to do that for a few reasons. Largely because, unfortunately, I can't avoid it. This car still does a lot of it, or most of its driving, at 100 or 110 Ks. And I'd like to keep the revs down while I'm doing that, keep it nice and comfortable, and give us a little bit better fuel economy there if we can. I also really wanted to largely keep this series to things that the average Joe Blow could do themselves at home in their garage, as I am here. Now, it may be possible to do those diff gears at home by yourself, but it starts to push the boundary of where most people are comfortable. Now, you may also notice the nice new diff bushes in this assembly. These are hugely common to go in these cars, and if you've ever had any sort of banging or clunking or that sort of thing coming from the rear end of your car, particularly when under load or launching, then there's a good chance these are the culprit. There's 3 of them in total, 1 here at the back and 2 at the front. And the job of these is to hold your diff assembly to the rest of this cradle. While this assembly's out, it's the perfect time to replace those diff bushes, or you may even just be here to see how we've done that. I've decided to cover that in full in a separate video, so I'll have a link to that up in the corner or down in the description below if you want to check that out. But let's have a quick look at how I've covered this by watching past me do all the hard work. While we've got some easy access, we're going to finish off by changing the diff fluid. Just 1 bolt at the very bottom to drain it and a 30mm on the side to fill. Used diff fluid is horrible smelling stuff, so do your best not to get any on you or it'll linger for weeks. Thanks past me, that job really wasn't so bad. I'm not sure why people dread it so much. Oh, yeah, that's right. This whole diff has to come out just to change those bushes. I get it. Oh well, at least we've got that here's one we prepared earlier diff ready to go, so let's start looking at how we're going to take this one out. Just quickly before we do run through that, if you're not sure what sort of diff you've got in your car, there is a quick and easy trick for this. Now they are normally labelled on the centre. They'll normally have a tag or a sticker of some sort that will tell you whether it's an LSD or open diff, but if you're not sure, easy enough, jack up the rear of your car and then turn one of the rear wheels. If then both wheels turn in the same direction, odds are you've got a limited slip diff and you don't have to do this. But if, as with this car, you turn the wheel on one side and the other wheel turns an opposite way, chances are you've got a single spinner or an open centre diff. Weird, right? Now there is a technical explanation for that and I definitely know it. I definitely do. We'll save that for another time, maybe when I've had some time to research that again. Okay, back to what we should be doing. I've got the rear of the car jacked up nice and high and those rear wheels off ready to go. This is where the safety message comes in. Up until now, replacing those diff bushes, I've followed the guidelines that come from the manufacturer as much as I could, and that's all pretty stock standard. Removing this rear cradle, it'll unbolt much the same whether you're doing this on a hoist or on the garage floor as we are here. The difference is that doing it here on the garage floor, we do have to have the rear up quite high to try and be able to get that out. Make sure you're taking all the safety precautions you can. Pretty standard stuff, good stands, make sure you're careful, make sure you're all set up. Look, anything going forward isn't actual advice from me. I'm doing this myself the first time, but you know, much of what I say isn't actual advice anyway, so there's no big change there. That's the boring stuff out the way. I'll try and film everything I can as we unbolt this, but it's going to be quite difficult and quite tight under there at times to do it, so let's run through our plan before we do that and give you a look at how this whole cradle actually comes out of the car. Okay, first up we'll remove the tail shaft. Use the handbrake and gearbox to remove each of these 10mm bolts. Any that you can't get to, release the handbrake and gearbox in neutral, turn the tail shaft, and then you should be able to access the rest. Then we'll move on to the handbrake back here. Undo that 10mm nut in the middle there until we can remove that cable coming from the front. And then the rear two you see there should be able to unclip from their holder there. A 10mm ratcheting spanner will really come in handy here. Pop this one exhaust mount off while you're back here. Moving on to the brakes, we'll undo the two bolts holding the brake calipers on in the rear and then hang it up out the way, probably from the top mount of your shock using some wire or cable ties, just to make sure we don't put any stress on that brake line. Then make sure not to forget the speed sensor. That's bolted in just down the back there where you can't see. I'm also going to pull these brake rotors off while still on the car to transfer to that new diff. These are rusty just from a few days of moisture, but they're still good. Then we can undo the lower bolt for your shock absorber and the 3 bolts for each of your control arms on each side. And I'm also going to do something a little different and remove the springs to make the whole cradle lower when coming out. I need to change these over to the new cradle anyway, but this should help try and make that all a little bit lower and slide out from the car easier. Shameless plug, but for tips on the springs or how to remove these, see our video on lowering this car, link up in the top corner now. Back underneath the car and these braces can come out, one on either side of the car. And then we can start removing any of those fittings that hold the cradle directly to the car. So there's one hidden up there behind your rear diff bush. 2 bolts, one either side up towards the front of the assembly, in behind your shock absorber there. Then the whole lot should be held in by your 4 remaining nuts, one on the front and back there of your spring on either side. Go ahead and undo one of these on each side and then make sure your jack's in position and ready to hold that diff cradle as it drops. Then you can undo the last one on each side and remove the cradle. Okay, fingers crossed, let's see how all that goes. old diff is out and it's all gone really quite smoothly other than my old man back, and we're ready to start setting up the new one and getting ready to throw it back in. A few quick notes on the removal process before we do that. If you weren't changing those springs over to your new diff, then you'd probably be quite safe in leaving those in. I had plenty enough clearance, but you wouldn't be able to leave the wheels on and just roll it out. At least I wouldn't with the stands I've got, and they're fairly universal stands. I expect you'll have much the same at home. My scrap timber assembly also seemed to work quite well with that little bit extra at the rear, just to make up for a bit of the difference in height in that cradle between the front and the rear of it. It also ensures that there was a little bit of a gap there for the sway bar, because that actually sits a little bit lower. And if you had just a straight piece of wood going across there, it would be sitting on the sway bar there. So using that stepped height seems to avoid that. It even seemed to balance quite well. It didn't fall off the jack or anything. So that may be a good sign for us putting it back in. And I just said that, so I probably jinxed it. The only thing that fought me even slightly through that whole process was getting the tail shaft out of the diff. It was a little bit stuck and stubborn in there, but a bit of penetrating oil and a little bit of tapping on the diff side there just to give it a bit of a vibration, and it popped straight out after that. Not too bad at all, just a little bit of patience. Now, all of those fittings from the tail shaft to the diff, all of those bolts, fittings, and any weights on there, I have been really careful to note their position and make sure they're marked so they go back in exactly the same way they come out of that tail shaft in relation to that tail shaft. So when we throw it back together, hopefully we won't have any balance issues on that front. And now, time to start reversing that whole process with our new unit. Now, the mounts in that diff cradle, where our studs go through, our bolts go through, our nuts hold onto, they do have a little bit of play, so there is a bit of room to move that cradle about. Luckily, Ford actually did something nice for us. There are points to align that cradle. There's a couple of holes in the body, one on each side, and a couple of holes in your diff cradle. Those, at the factory, I believe they have simple dowel tools that slot into there and help you align it. We don't have those, so we're just going to align those as best we can by eye and button it all up again. I'll be using Loctite on all those main cradle fittings, on the control arms, and of course on the tail shaft bolts. I think that covers off everywhere that's required, but I'll have a look as I'm going. Now, the only fiddly bit in this, hopefully anyway, should be that handbrake assembly and adjusting that. You are meant to adjust them at the brakes. There's a little adjuster that adjusts the size of those brake shoes, and then adjust it later at the cable. Perhaps we'll cover that in further detail in a later video, but the manuals that I've seen cover it off pretty well. I don't go anything too precise on that as they recommend, but just adjust it as best I feel I can. Okay, I think that covers it. I'm really keen to get this thing back out and driving. It's been too long, so I'm going to get back to work and get this knocked out. Alright, that diff's back in and it's all gone fairly well to plan. I'm rapt to have this car back on the road. Now, I have only had it for a quick lap around the block, but so far, feedback on those Nolafane bushes all seems fine. I'm not getting any harshness or extra noise or anything like that so far, but I will keep you updated in the comments down below for any extra feedback I have as I put some more Ks on this. But now, for something more important. Does that LSD actually work? Well, I'm pretty sure I know a way to test that, but before I do, make sure you've liked this video and you subscribe to the channel for more coming up. Done? Alright, thanks guys. Here we go. Time for just a little baby shed skid. Let's see if this is working. I'd say that worked much better. Now to go apologise to my neighbours and explain it had to be done for the fine people of YouTube. Hope you've enjoyed that one and has helped a few of you out, and cheers for watching, guys.